and Innovation Committee. Good morning, everybody, for the June 6th, 2022 Sacramento Area Council of Governments Policy and Innovation Committee. I'm going to call us to order. Would you like to read the general instructions, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. Good morning. This meeting is being recorded and streamed over the internet. For members of the public viewing this meeting online, we accept and encourage public comment and have provided options that are listed at the top of this meeting agenda. For our staff and committee members attending in person today, SACOG has installed cameras in our boardroom, so you are on camera and visible to parties viewing this meeting online. Please do not pick up or move the table mics that are in front of you. You can speak at a normal volume and the mics will transmit the audio through Zoom. Green light means that you are unmuted and red light means you are muted. Please do not access Zoom through your laptop device. Since you're here in person, there's no need for you to do that. For our committee members participating online, thank you for joining us today. Please mute your devices when you're not speaking and use the raise hand feature in Zoom should you wish to comment. All right, would you like to go to roll call or start with the pledge?
Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody will rise and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, fantastic. Let us please call the roll.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Bernasconi? Absent. Burris?
Here.
Frericks?
Here.
Stollard?
Here.
Vice Chair Middleton? Absent. Vice Chair Thomas?
Here.
And Chair Kozlowski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, do we have any public communication?
There is no public comment at this time.
All right, fantastic. Any board members want to discuss items on the consent agenda or make a motion to approve them in total?
Thomas, move for approval.
Second by Frericks.
Okay, we have a motion by Thomas and a second by Frericks. Please call the roll.
All right, Director Bernasconi? Absent. Burris?
Yes.
Frericks?
Aye.
Stollard?
Aye.
Vice Chair Middleton?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thomas?
Aye.
And Chair Kozlowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, will you please call the first item?
We have item number 4, an action item, authorized release of a request for proposals for legal services presented by Eric.
Hi, Eric Johnson. I was on mute, so I'll start that over. So Eric Johnson here at SACOG. I am before you today to request the authorization of a release of a request for proposal for legal services. SACOG, as a typical practice, goes out to bid for all of its contracted services every 5 years. Our current contract with legal services is up in the beginning of 2023. We are requesting authorization to go out for all of our legal services as a good practice, and are doing so at this time because we want to ensure that if we do change firms, that there is a timely transition of things between current council and new council. We would be coming back to the board for the actual award of this contract. And so our request today is to have a comprehensive RFP that covers all of the categories of legal services, inclusive of those that we utilize on the EIR for our MTPSCS or the 2024 blueprint. And we would request a 3-year term for this contract with 2 one-year extensions. So happy to answer any questions about this request.
Any questions or comments from board members?
Happy to make a motion to go forward with the action, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Second by Middleton.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comments?
No public comment.
Okay, and no other questions, then let's motion to approve has been placed on. Call the roll.
All right, Director Bernasconi? Absent. Burris?
Yes.
Frericks?
Yes.
Stollard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Middleton?
Yes.
Vice Chair Thomas?
Aye.
And Chair Kozlowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, item number 5.
All right. This is also an action item, a request for proposals for website design and development services presented by Mia Lopez, SACOG staff.
Hello, good morning, everyone. The action item I'm presenting today is to procure a new website for SACOG. The details are in your packet, but I'll be going over some of the highlights. The website we have currently is almost 7 years old, and a lot has changed since 2015 when it comes to technology and the way we work. The website, we have the traffic to SACOG's website has slowly grown and now serves thousands of visitors a month for a variety of purposes. It's a connection for agencies seeking information on local, state, and federal funding availability. It provides direct contacts for city and county staff looking to SACOG for support on projects, and it's the information hub for the public who connect with the inspiring stories about our region. It's even been serving as a boardroom of sorts as staff from cities and counties, local agencies, and the public tune into board and committee meetings when in-person attendance is not possible. As we turn to an increased virtual future, the website will continue to serve as the face of the agency, and the information and message should communicate clearly who SACOG is and provide easy-to-use resources for our members. Staff is seeking authorization to contract up to $100,000 for 3 to 5 year term with website development and maintenance services, which have been budgeted in the overall work program. With ongoing discussions about SACOG's vision and mission with the board, in addition to the expiration of the contract coming up in early 2023, the timing is perfect to rethink one of our most visited mediums and provide a complete experience for those who interact with the agency. I will open it up now if you have any questions.
Is there a metaverse component to the new website coming?
It could be. There very well could be. Who knows?
So I'd just like to comment that I think this is very timely, and I appreciate our staff's approach to, rethinking the more comprehensive nature in light of how people are working these days. So I think it's a very timely item, and look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Hear, hear. Any other comments from directors? Okay, I'll entertain a motion if there aren't any others.
Motion by Burris.
Second by Thomas.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Burris and a second by Director Thomas. Please call the roll.
All right, Director Bernasconi, absent. Burris,
Yes.
Frericks,
Yes.
Stollard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Middleton,
Yes.
Vice Chair Thomas,
Yes.
and Chair Kozlowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. All right, we're on to information item number 6.
All right, item number 6, this is an advocacy update. I believe Christina or Eric will kick it off.
Christina Locke is going to be presenting this item.
Hi, yes, thank you. So quick update on bills, and then the main part of today's item, we have our lobbyist from KP Public Affairs here to give us an update. Just a quick update on the state legislative calendar and where we are with bills. We just passed a couple of major deadlines for bills moving out of their original house or house of origin. In May was the deadline for bills to pass out of Appropriations Committee. And then since the committee staff report item was written in June, early June, was the deadline for bills to pass out of their original house. So Assembly bills to get out of the Assembly and Senate bills to get out of the Senate. June is going to be another busy month as legislators have to move their bills through their final policy committee hearings. It's also the constitutional deadline for the legislature to pass a budget, which is June 15th. And so on that, we've got KP Public Affairs here, like I mentioned, to give us an update on the state budget and our IIG budget proposal request. So we've got Ed Manning and Vanessa Kahina here, I believe.
Thanks, Christina. I'll kick it off. As you know, last couple of years, we were advocating for a SACOG specific funding request. The result of that was a statewide funding mechanism called REAP 2.0, which basically expanded significantly an existing funding program so that the type of infill infrastructure funding that we were looking for would be made available. The formula used for that program, though, disadvantaged us in that of the roughly 600 million in that program, we per formula only got roughly 33 million of the funding for our Green Means Go implementation effort. We also got a $3 million earmark in a specific member request by Dr. Pan. And along the way of a couple of years of that lobbying effort, we ran into significant headwinds in that we were asking for a SACOG specific funding request, and we're asking for a significant amount of money. So evaluating that, and also the fact that the REAP money hasn't gone out the door yet, we needed to, if we were going to come back with a budget request this year, it would be very difficult to go back to the same well, given that there's significant funding available that hasn't been put to work yet. And so this year we took a different approach and strategically decided we would try to build through a broader coalition for a different statewide funding request that we could benefit from. And that would be to expand the infill infrastructure grant program so that it would be less biased to infill development in heavily densified coastal areas with very, very frequent levels of transportation service and much higher densities than we can accomplish here in our region. And so we set about creating a sort of parallel program and asking for funding. We were hopeful that we would get the other COGs on board for this, since they would all benefit as well. And spent months and months trying to do that. Originally, we had the CalCog organization supportive drafted language with them, but unfortunately, the other COGs were either unresponsive or so slow in responding and not all that cooperative that it dragged on till almost March or later. And at that point, we had to make a decision to sort of part ways and pursue the funding with a different coalition. Fortunately, there was a large group of environmental community representatives and other housing advocates in a dialogue to work together to try to look at housing in areas with that were more low VMT sites, which were pretty consistent, almost entirely consistent with what we've been trying to do with the sites we've identified through Green Means Go throughout the 6-county region. And so we were able to join up with them and make our proposal for expanding the pie for infill infrastructure grant program their package, and have been advocating with them ever since. The disadvantage we had was we were late to the game this year, but in so doing, we gained a pretty powerful statewide coalition. We've been advocating ever since. This would again be a statewide ask, which SACOG would benefit from. We are not, because we were so late to the game, we didn't have really a chance to get in the governor's budget or the May revise, although we did meet with the governor's office. We met with Department of Finance. We've met with myriad legislators from inside and outside our delegation. Got a letter of support for our proposal, but we're still looking for opportunities to see if we can embed it in the budget somehow. We're also looking at another program that the governor proposed, a new program called the Adaptive Reuse Program, to see if we can expand that. And so the efforts are ongoing. The odds are long because the budget is a morass right now. And there's just, when you've got different COGs advocating for different things, and so many different budget asks, even among the housing advocates. It is difficult to break through, but we're looking for any opportunity we can. We had a good discussion last week with the head of the Office of Planning and Research and HCD director about this adaptive reuse program specifically. And so we're going to follow up with them and see if we can expand that program to maybe include a pilot program that Green Means Go would benefit from. And so ongoing effort. And, you know, the good news is everyone knows about SACOG and everyone knows about Green Means Go. I think the bad news is they want a program that is broader than that. And we're trying to figure out how to fit that need for a broader statewide program, but that we can still take advantage of. And that's sort of where we are.
Okay. Is there more presentation or looking for questions at this point?
That's it.
Okay. All right. I will start out, if everybody will indulge me. With regard to the other COGs not being kind of eager to join up on this particular expedition, why do you suppose that is? It feels like this is something that feels kind of obvious to us, but that may be just because we've been talking about it and originated the idea, you know, 2+ years ago now. What is the thing that is leaving them less than enthused? Is it distractions with other funding sources or projects, or is this program idiosyncratic to our particular region?
I'll let Christina jump in, but I mean, part of it is distraction because the Bay Area and LA, and in particular the Bay Area, have had such good success all along. I think they benefit greatly from the current system the way it is, and had a focus on certain housing programs that they thought that they would benefit from. And some regions are just not as focused. Others like the status quo or are very focused on programs or funding asks that will benefit specifically their region. And that could be on transportation or it could be on housing or both. So Christina, anything you want to add?
No, I think Ed captured it well. I think the only thing I'll add is that it just really speaks to how regions are so different across the state. And that's something that we find ourselves having to have a conversation with the legislature in a variety of formats and issues, but how different regions, what it means to implement your SCS is going to look differently depending on where you're at. And so I think that's part of why we had a challenge capturing the attention as well.
Does that beg the question then of whether or not the formula we've devised for Green Means Go or the target type of project should be expanded or modified in some way? And that's maybe a question for James or Eric or Casey also. I don't know. Maybe beyond where we're at right now, but just curious.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some good lessons here that we do need to learn. Even with Green Means Go, as Ed referenced, it was a statewide program that was really broader than just Green Means Go. In some ways, we're being more focused in that. And I think, like Ed and Christina both said, in some ways, well, you know, there's a budget surplus, so we want a lot of money to go into infill infrastructure. And we're not actually on the, well, correct me, Ed and Christina, I think we're on the same page, at least of Southern California on that. But the changes to the program are what we really need because our local jurisdictions don't qualify. They don't even submit applications to this IIG infill infrastructure program because the criteria do not work for inland California, but they do work for coastal California, right? That's a bit of the problem we're caught in. That's at least one of the problems we're caught in. I will say, by the way, I know we couldn't get the other COGs quick enough, but we do have a pretty broad coalition helping us in support of this effort. Not that it's not an uphill climb with everything else that's a call on the budget and the budget surplus right now, but I do want to mention there's a pretty broad coalition in support of this.
Directors, questions or thoughts about this?
Looks like Director Thomas and Frericks both have their hands raised.
Director Thomas.
Great, thank you very much. Just kind of piggybacking on your questions, Mike. I'd like just a little deeper understanding of, what criteria works for the coastal but not for the inland. What kinds of examples are we talking about? And what does broader mean when you say that Green Means Go is perhaps not broad enough? Can you help give me a little more context of what we're talking about here in terms of projects?
Yeah, I think broad was my characterization, and that may actually be upside down. It may have been too targeted just as easily. So just in terms of what we were asking for may not suit every region.
So going back to the original IIG program, and which is the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, was created in 2004 via initiative and then statute later. There was a transit-oriented development funding program. There were a lot of programs that have been on the books for a long time, and all those programs predate SB 375. They predate sustainable community strategy documents. They've been updated somewhat, but they're not in sync. And those programs are one-off programs that fund projects that are well through the development phase. They've got their CEQA documents done, and they tend to fund based on how many housing units you anticipate building. What we need is radically different, and we're not alone in this, right? There are, in inland California in particular, we have sites or zones that need infrastructure funding on the front end to open up the site so that developers will come in and actually build housing there, because they can't finance that infrastructure improvement on the back of an infill project. We also, in these funding formulas, we don't have the same densities, right? So we can't capture the same levels of funding. And so the programs are not really designed for the realities of where we are and what we need. We were successful in the REAP program and sort of rejiggering that. But that program is brand new. It had, has hundreds of millions of dollars statewide. Our share of that is 30-something million. And because we were successful at that last year, we were trying to find another additional source of funding this year. And what we're trying to do is really broaden the applicability of an existing funding program so that we can attract dollars on the front end for these infrastructure investments, even though we don't have a housing project with X number of units, at the end of the process. So we're trying to get first dollar in, not last dollar in. If that makes sense.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. So we're looking for more speculative dollars rather than.
Yeah, we're looking for infrastructure dollars up front. Yeah.
Great.
And trying to say to the state, look at the zoning that is in that area. You can tell how many housing units will be built. Look at the policies each jurisdiction's developed to make sure that infrastructure gets built and housing can get built.
Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Director Frericks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick points. One, I think really appreciate all the work thus far that's been done by the KP teams, Vanessa and Brian and Ed and such. I think, so I recognize the efforts that have gone into this already, and I think they've been very productive, although we might not quite get it sort of over the finish line this year. I think we will call it the sort of the efforts in securing the dollars in last year's budget that we were successful in finally doing did take a couple of years. So that's one. Secondly, I do appreciate the comments around sort of the budget process at the moment being a bit of a morass, frankly, maybe even more than normal, is what it seems like, especially because there's so much in the way of surplus. And so there's sort of one of those situations where everything is an option, it seems like. And so therefore it's harder for them to sort of discern what the legislature and the governor's office, what really truly are the key priorities. A couple of points additionally, I think that to Director Kozlowski or Chair Kozlowski's question about sort of the other MPOs, I think one of the issues is actually, and I think it's important for us, especially vis-a-vis the work in this mega region working group, is to actually, frankly, have this kind of a discussion there. We've gotten right up to the edge, right up to this sort of precipice about having that discussion. Then we actually haven't sort of had that significant discussion. We've talked about, we've got this list of projects that we're all, at least in the Northern California MPOs, wanting to work on together and things of that nature. But the real issue is that we do need to actually do legislative advocacy together as well in the Capitol. That's just one, and this situation for this year, whether it was SCAG or SANDAG in Southern California or MTC in the Bay Area, they each had their sort of respective platforms or policies or priorities that they were advocating, and they were kind of doing it alone for each of their respective regions. And I think that we really do need to sort of, in a very productive and positive way, sort of force the issue at the mega region working group. I mean, if this is really going to be something that is more than just putting a list of projects together and having meetings and discussing, having very good presentations on, the benefits of toll lanes and things of that nature, pricing and things like that, we're going to really need to actually have sort of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and actually do some advocacy work together, especially as it relates in the halls of the state capitol and or in DC. So I think that I would just like to see us advocate for, having that kind of a discussion in that body and really having, and I'm sure the staff of the respective MPOs maybe already having those discussions, but I think it's really time for us as some of the members of this board to be having the discussions with members, especially at least at the mega region working group level for sure. But there may be need for additional sort of advocacy work there as it relates to some of the other MPOs. But if we have all these efforts underway between San Joaquin, SACOG, and MTC, and planning and such, and yet we're not doing advocacy work together, I feel like we're going to continue to sort of see a situation like this. So last quick point would just be that I do really appreciate the sort of this alliance of groups that have come together in terms of housing organizations, environmental organizations, SACOG, others. I think there's a real opportunity for it to even grow and be more productive than the work that was done this year. So again, really appreciate the work by KP, particularly on these efforts. And thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Frericks. Excellent suggestions all. Director Stollard. Good morning.
I appreciate the conversation. Thank you, Mike and others. One thought I had was, well, maybe we're trying too hard to do a kumbaya with everybody. Maybe we should just pick a few MPOs and focus on for whom we feel a community of interest about this. And some of them may need our half to help carry them as well. And they're not all big guys like the Bay Area and the South states. So that's just a thought. Strategically, maybe we need to find a smaller community of interest and then build from there. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from directors?
Can I make one more observation, Chair Kozlowski?
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to do this in a sort of a constructive lesson learned kind of way. Certainly in the Bay Area, and Director Frericks, I definitely hear your request. We have some legislative principles, but maybe we don't actually have the action plan yet, right, with the mega region working group. But one of the reasons in the Bay Area that they looked at this in terms of IAG and housing and had a hard time with it is because they have launched in that region an effort called CASA, and they have been pushing a whole housing agenda and package with their delegation. And so, of course, we would love to have them kind of sign right up, but to their credit, they've been on a very specific housing strategy for a while, which, by the way, I don't think we should carbon copy, but I think there's some really interesting and important lessons learned and all that. So yes, it was disappointing. We couldn't get everybody together all at once in terms of the other MPOs, and we've given you some of those reasons. And I think, others are reasons which I think are, maybe again, some good fodder for us as we think about housing and the housing crisis and what we might do further to address the housing challenge in our region.
Does the MTC's program address this first dollar in kind of thing for converting commercial to residential?
They're in a bit of a different, we could give you some more information because I think it's really interesting. They've got a housing authority across all 9 counties. They're talking about bonding and going to the ballot for housing support. I will say, I think our first dollar in challenge, right, versus last dollar in is a uniquely Central Valley, Inland California challenge.
Interesting. Okay, well, if there's not other comments, I will say thank you once again to Mr. Manning and his team, and Christina, thank you very much for presenting this. And we can move on to item number 7.
All right, another information item, the SACOG Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group meeting report out.
Okay, that would be me. Thanks very much. So, and Director Frericks, please jump in here as needed, and Director Middleton as well, if you're able to, since you're on the REI working group. The Friday before Memorial Day weekend, yes, we were a little worried about getting enough attendance the Friday afternoon before Memorial Day, but really happy that we did get some really good attendance and some good discussion. The main agenda item really for the last Race, Equity, Inclusion Working Group of the board and the public stakeholders was to review a lot of the one-on-one conversations and input with board members of the REI working group, other public stakeholders, and some listening sessions that our consultant is standing up and implementing around the region. The consultant, by the way, is Venture with Purpose and Shanice Alexander. And a lot of their sort of raw notes, if you will, were in the agenda packet for the REI working group. And I would really actually recommend those to you. I would say, I think one of the challenges on sort of absorbing those raw notes is there's a lot of information. It is raw, but I think there were some really interesting ideas that were floated. And I think and Chair Jennings did a great job of getting the board conversation going at the REI working group. There's 3 kind of buckets, if you will, that we're looking at. And a lot of this input, just as a reminder, now that the board has adopted the racial equity statement of change and commitment, this input is really about how to operationalize that statement. It's really about developing a racial equity action plan that we want to finalize this calendar year. And the 3 buckets are really SACOG's programs and policies, the work that we do that has a big influence and can have equity benefits. SACOG's operations, really more things like internal hiring, staff culture, staff diversity, et cetera. And finally, the board and the board's engagement in this topic. So those are sort of the three buckets, if you will, broken out. And I would say the conversation at the REI working group focused on some really important things. And this by no means was sort of a short list of priorities, but it was, I think, really interesting conversation. One, I would say, is how to involve our local government partners. Since we're a council of governments, we've got, as you all know, 28 local governments around the region. We don't necessarily want this to not just be a SACOG effort as an agency. We want it to be a regional effort, perhaps a coalition of the willing. But we know there's a lot of interest around the region. There's a lot of our local governments that have adopted resolutions that are trying to tackle inequities and racial disparities and access to opportunity. So how do we do that? How do we do this work, both to strengthen our muscle as an agency and as a staff, to support you as a board, but to also engage our local governments, number one. Second, I mentioned board engagement, and it's a topic we threw out at that meeting, and I would also just throw it to all of you, which is, if you think about the adoption of this racial equity action plan, and even as the board reconvenes next year, perhaps with some new members, what are the kinds of activities and work and engagement that you all think would be meaningful in terms of carrying forward our commitment to racial equity at a board level? Board workshops, engagement, education, expert speakers, et cetera. And then finally, I think one thing that we've known for a while, but I think really came out in these one-on-ones, is the importance of SACOG working with our local government partners to do good and get community engagement. This committee adopted the Community Voices Committee that we're trying to set up to go beyond I think even our traditional partners, and to really try to listen and engage community members and community stakeholders in partnership with our local governments. The board has made a commitment with $3 million to our Engage, Empower, Implement program that you have heard quite a bit about. So that question around kind of community engagement, that EEI opportunity, the questions we are now getting as we apply for federal grants under the new infrastructure bill, which is, what are you doing for community engagement? What are you doing to advance equity? All of those things I think are truly important. And I think going to be a really big focus of us on our work moving forward is, how do we do this together with all of your jurisdictions, but be more intentional and better around engaging community members so they can shape their infrastructure solutions and direct more of those dollars. So again, just to close out, I would say we're still a lot of those one-on-ones and listening sessions. We're holding listening sessions with your local government staff, and per my executive director report last week, I would encourage, we are trying to get more of your staff involved in those listening sessions. They will continue through the month of June. And then our intention, there are 3 more meetings of the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group this year, is to really develop a draft racial equity action plan for the REI working group to take up at the end of July. And then have that finalized their following meeting and bring that back to the board later this fall.
Okay. I'm not sure what to say to that. That sounds like a perfectly good way forward. Questions or comments from directors? Perhaps Lucas or Portia would like to weigh in.
Director Kozlowski or Chair, one quick item, I think, just to add to this issue around the sort of the listening sessions. One of the items that I had asked in that meeting was, so they said that we're doing X number of listening sessions of, various agency staff, transit agencies, whether it's city and county staffs, transit agency staff, community stakeholders, right? And that was one of the things that was talked about. And so I asked at that meeting for if they were able to provide a list of, who has been talked to already or talked with, and I have discussions with, and in these listening sessions, and I did get a follow up because one of the items that I raised was about the issue of needing to not just have it be focused on discussions with people in the core of the region, and making sure there was a sort of a at least relatively equal geographic distribution, but especially I mentioned the issue of 70% of the region is rural as an example, and so there was comments about, oh yes, we will definitely have discussions make sure that we're having discussions with folks in a sort of a balanced way. And there are, I guess, still a few items that are upcoming, but I would say, and I also specifically raised tribal governments as an example, as one sort of category that might be important for us to have discussions with, listening sessions. And so apparently that is some of those discussions are being scheduled, but I would say that I've got a list here in front of me of just the different listening sessions that have occurred and such. And so, for example, on the city and county staff listening session, we had city of Sacramento and city of Citrus Heights staff participate. That's it so far from the nearly 30 jurisdictions throughout the region. So I feel like there was a pretty robust representation from across the different transit agencies. and El Dorado Transit, Roseville, Yolo, Sac County, I mean, a bunch. So that's positive. Placer County Transit, SAC RT, and others. On the community-based stakeholders, I think that's been a pretty robust grouping as well. But I definitely think there probably could be more from either cities and county staff that are needed to sort of have, I would say, a little more of a balance of throughout the whole region of voices that need to be heard. So that's my only real comment. I know that SACOG staff is working hard to have scheduled these final sessions, but if there's anything I would say from the staff side of things that we can do to help, we as the board can help promote to make sure that there's some attendance from some of our agencies, that probably wouldn't be a bad thing. Thanks very much.
Thoughts? Yeah, it's I think I asked this question once before, is how do you choose who should, could, can have a voice and is willing to participate? That's tricky because having a fully balanced set of inputs requires getting some people who are pretty insensitive to this topic, their voices too, potentially, right? So that's hard. Other directors, questions, comments, suggestions?
Chair Kozlowski, may I offer that we've extended the invitation to every city manager and county executive in the region. And so we would love, it'd be amazing if we got all 28. We understand that that's probably not practical for a lot of our members, but I just want to make sure you know that we are trying to cast a broad net to really encourage all perspectives to participate in the listening sessions. So
all right, well, gathering input from city managers shouldn't be all that difficult for the elected officials to request or insist upon. So
yeah, and I suppose
that's a starting place. Yeah,
right. And what we've done is said
texting me right now while we're talking, so I can probably.
So the way that we've done these invites is sent them out to city managers, county executives, and said we would love for you or your designee to attend, so that every jurisdiction can decide. Everyone's at different places, so they can decide who it is that they think would best participate for them in that session.
Okay. It's too bad there isn't like an ombudsman in each jurisdiction for this particular set of interests and topics, because they would be the right person to gather all together. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll return to this again for sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for the thoughtful commentary and good planning. Final item, number 8.
All right, it is the update on proposed citizens transportation tax initiative in Sacramento County. James, you gonna kick it off?
Yeah, I'll kick it back to the chair.
All right, so I helped write this, but it's going to sound like I'm reading it. I just want to make sure that everybody gets this succinctly, because if I talk extemporaneously, it'll take 10 minutes. For this next and final item, I want to remind board members that we had a lengthy discussion of this issue at our May board meeting, and there was widespread interest from board members in getting any updates we had on this topic at these committee meetings. This is just a brief update that we're going to have today, but I want to report that we are talking with the proponents ballot measure and hope to have something more substantive before our full board meeting on June 16th. Our goal is to figure out a path forward that allows the region to meet its GHG commitments and preserve access to state and federal funding that we rely upon. So that's what's going on with the ballot measure. The chairs of each of the standing committees and Chair Jennings, the 4 of us, have been working towards getting a meaningful discussion happening again about resolving this issue of greenhouse gas emissions and protecting local fund or federal and state funding for transportation projects. So that's what's going on right now. Is there more, James, that you'd like to?
No, I think that's a great summary. Thanks for your leadership, Chair Kozlowski, in this. And like you say, and I think we made this clear, although certainly it was a lot, right, to get through and wrap all your heads around at the May board meeting. But really, our belief is there's not a lot of time to come to a resolution. And so because you don't meet in July, if there is something for the SACOG board to be engaged in and a part of, your board meeting next week is going to be a pretty important milestone.
Yeah, Yeah, and Chair Jennings rightly identified that we needed to reach some kind of resolution by June 16th when we meet again. Because that not only is as you said, our last meeting until August, but the actual advocacy language that will go into everybody's voter guide. That is one of the places that we're trying to make sure that it is crystal clear that these goals that we have are protected, and that needs to be submitted sometime in July in that gap between our meetings. So that's why we're pressing to get this done this week or next, so that we can all go into our summer with other things on our mind. So any questions or comments, suggestions from directors?
Chair Kozlowski, I'd just like to thank you, as well as our other department head or committee chairs, as well as our staff, for engaging on this. It's really a critical issue, and really appreciate everyone's intentional efforts to find a path forward. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. I'm happy to do it. And just for everybody, it's me, Don Saylor, and Michael Saragosa and Rick Jennings who have been working on this together. Any other comments, questions, words of advice? All right. Excellent. Okay. Any final reports from staff for today?
You got
I'm sorry. Director Stollard, please.
Well, it's sort of something I wanted to mention before we conclude our meeting. The New York Times in the Sunday Business section had a very long form article on NIMBYism in California and YIMBYism, yes, in my backyard, focused on a woman in Marin County who's frustrated a small condo development at the end of her street for 18 years. What it made me think about was sometimes, you know, when you see such strong bills coming in the legislature that would threaten our land use authority in our individual jurisdictions, you want to react with such anger. And then you recognize that there's a lot of jurisdictions in our state that are not carrying their load. And sometimes they're captives of small groups that basically prevent them from doing anything. And it puts an added burden on all of us who are trying to find a reasonable course. So I just wanted to observe that's a very interesting article. If you have access to it, I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other reports from directors? Suggested reading while we pick up the New York Times?
Chair
All right.
Kozlowski, just one announcement that I again had in my report. We're really delighted to be bringing national author Chuck Maroon to town he will be speaking at the board workshop next Thursday. He'll be doing a tour of, I believe what we're trying to cook up is Rancho Cordova and Citrus Heights. And then for Director Middleton, thank you and your staff for hosting Mr. Maroon that evening at the Citrus Heights Community Center, 6 p.m. Very small fee for tickets, and all the revenues are going to scholarship programs for all of our sponsors, which is American Public Works Association, American Planning Association. I'm going to miss them all. Young Professionals in Transportation, WTS, and one more.
Young and Emerging Planners.
Thank you, Casey. But if you haven't heard him, and I think some of you are aware of him, his most recent book is Confessions of a Recovering Transportation Engineer. He really hits to the heart of fiscal constraint, being smarter with limited resources, fiscal health of local government, land use and transportation, all the things we're talking about. He is provocative. He makes you think. He's got a really interesting perspective and a take on all of this. So very excited to have him for our board meeting, and also excited to have him tour the region and speak over at Citrus Heights.
Excellent. Okay, good stuff to look forward to for next Thursday. All right, thank you very much, everybody. And I'll see you next Thursday and at other events as they pop up. And we are at, let's see, 10:55 adjourned.